If you think you can't improvise in music, you already have. You just didn't call it that. Have you ever been in that situation where you're at a gig or you're playing music that maybe you've practiced it a lot, maybe you practiced it a little, it doesn't really matter, but there comes a situation, there comes a time where the notes aren't going as planned, or the arrangement isn't going as planned, or the people you're playing with do something unexpected. Even if you're not an improvising group, right? Even if you're a group that normally everything's written out, we do it all the same way. There comes a time when there's that moment. And I love musical theater for this reason. I love actors for this reason. There are so many actors that say, well, I live for that. You know, when something hits the fan or when something goes awry, we have this opportunity to respond, and it makes it fun and fresh. And when you're doing 7 shows a week, who doesn't want a little bit of variety, right? And so they can thrive on that. They can really create moments that weren't going to be created. And some loyal theater goers will go to shows over and over again just to hope for those moments, to spot those moments. But as a musician, I'm sure you've been in a situation where something didn't go as planned and you found yourself making something up. Maybe just playing a note that fit with the key, maybe improvising on a scale, maybe just holding a note, maybe stopping, throwing in a rest that doesn't exist. But you naturally were led to fill the space. And if we think of music as a conversation, which I want to get into so much deeper, even if it is all printed on the page and it's prearranged and it's a certain way and we've decided exactly how we're going to do the thing, those beautiful moments are still full of conversation and interactions and eye glances and breathing together. And if you play a style of music that is less written out, popular music and rock and the blues and jazz and even being a church musician or a sacred vocalist, you know that creating a moment from that energy is one of the reasons why you do it. And so no matter what style you're in, there have been moments where you made something up, made something work, made something happen, a little flourish, a little decoration, a little alteration. I know most of us have created introductions or tags or endings without even thinking about it, and just you kind of started the music, or you decided to end the music, or sometimes you're at a gig and, you know, it's not going maybe the way that you thought, or you can see the audience response maybe isn't at the level that you'd hoped for. And so we find a way to graciously kind of come to the end of that tune. Or I've had situations before where the MC needed to speak. And so then, you know, you sort of end the tune right in the middle. We didn't plan on that. We don't have a end it in the middle plan, but we create this moment where there's a conversation. And I think the more that we are living in connection and conversation, improvisation doesn't become some skill or some talent that we're born with. It just becomes, you know, part of the job. If we haven't met yet, I'm EP Archer. This is Music Rebels Rising, where serious musicians break old patterns and finally create music that actually feels like them. So when we have this opportunity to react in the moment, sometimes we dismiss that. You know, we don't honor it. We don't give it the weight that it deserves because we say, well, that wasn't advanced. And, you know, I didn't shred over the Coltrane Giant Steps alternate changes at 100 miles an hour. So I'm not an improviser. And I think there is a lot of limiting beliefs. I remember way back when I was in college, the Uptown String Quartet came, and dating myself a little bit here, but I just remember those ladies playing music in a string quartet format in a way I'd never witnessed. And they were moving and improvising and trading and conversing and shouting and high-fiving with their instruments, with their voices, with this particular group's signature sound. And I remember my friend Tamara and I just like jumped up and we were like, yeah, and we were into it and we were screaming. And, you know, some of the other attendees were much more muted in their response and used to maybe like a classical response. And I remember one of the ladies in the quartet said, we want you to cheer. We want you to be a part of this. And how fun does it feel? You go out to a sporting event and, your team's doing great or your team's struggling. You want to hear that talk back, in the stands. You want to have that audience like be there with you. And I think that's one of the fun things about doing something that isn't planned. There is that element of risk. And in that element of risk, you are joining with everyone that's ever taken a risk. You're joining with the audience. You're joining with your heart and being brave in that moment and rising up to the occasion. So don't dismiss that as not being advanced. There are people also that practice improvisation in a very formulaic way, in a rudimentary way. The language has almost become institutionalized in the way it's been passed down most recently, as opposed to when it was learned. And some of our favorite improvisers, Charlie Parker, who almost single-handedly wrote the bebop language to Dizzy Gillespie, and Bach, the original improviser. If you just play any Bach piece, you will find those chord tones, those half-step leading patterns, those resolutions that feel so fun to play. And I remember my violin teacher in college saying, hey, play that with a different rhythm. And I was working on an unaccompanied sonata, and I was like, what? And he whipped out his violin and just played all these crazy different rhythms and different ways of attacking the melody. And he improvised those rhythms. And I thought, how did he come up with that? Like what? And of course, we can sit down and mathematically or left brain come up with all the different variables and methodically practice those. But I think the bigger point here with Music Rebels is that we want to find what feels beautiful, delicious, juicy to us, and then let's extrapolate and riff on that. Maybe it's as simple as a major seventh chord. Maybe it's as simple as changing the rhythm in your classical sonata so that the speed of the notes changes as you practice. And then you get better practice because you've practiced it in many different ways. It can be so enlightening to practice, hardcore classical music or hardcore melodies or things that are very challenging on their own with the use of improvised rhythms, tempos, grooves. And that can be enlightening and fun. And all you have to do is set a different rhythm to it. Many of us practice our scales in that way, our intervals. If you don't already practice intervals and scales in this way, it is so much more fun, exciting, and risky than reading a written out exercise or an etude. How many different ways can I play the third? I can ascend, I can go up, I can go down, I can go up, down, ascending, I can go down, up, descending, I can go up, down, descending. Like, I think I'm nerding out a little bit here, but hopefully you're nerding out with me. And to me, when I think of practice, improvising is so fun to practice because I can use both halves of my brain. I can enable my heart and soul. I can connect. And in life, isn't that what we're doing all the time? Maybe as musicians, we have this idea that is a misunderstanding of what improvisation actually is. It's just responding in the moment with a conversation. And if you're a musician, you know the language of music. You've improvised hundreds of times without labeling it that, without realizing it's that. And it's already happening. You just haven't expanded on it or given credit where credit's due. And when we go through life, we don't have a script or sheet music or exact points that we follow, and we're having a conversation with someone, when we face something hard, when we are waxing poetic, when we're in a relationship. And so the practicing of reacting in the moment as a conversation when you're a musician is the same practice of just showing up for life and being ready to jump into it all, to taste it all, to be willing to stand on the edge of that diving board and jump off. Maybe you don't have a perfect loop-de-loop, but you can cannonball and you can enjoy it and you can connect with whatever language that you have, with whatever is floating on your bow or on your guitar pick or in your voice in that moment, because that is just saying and feeling who you are. Improvisation isn't a special talent. It's something you've already been doing, and having the courage to build on it means you are adding this human, beautiful element to your playing, to your conversation, to your connection with other people. And if you're not doing it yet, my call out to you is try it. in the simplest way. You can begin with one note or something that's already written, changing the rhythm up, throwing on just a beat or a groove behind it that doesn't usually go with it. That's improvising the groove and the pocket. But think of a way that you could play differently and have a conversation with the music, with the composer, with yourself, with the songwriter, and really just take a few moments to explore that and feel into it. I can't wait to hear what you're going to do. If you're ready for your music, your sound, and your next step, join the revolution.